Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this month's Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting. Fire alarm procedures are as follows. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer, assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst this meeting is in progress. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public, and this meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone else intend to film the meeting? No, and we have no members of the public here this evening, so we'll move on. I've got two requests from members to speak under 20.1. That's Councillor Garner on item 7 and Councillor Manners on item number 10. I've not received any requests for public speaking, so we move on to the main agenda. Apologies for absence. I've not got any. Have we got any, Alan?
Apologies from Councillor Green.
Councillor Green. Okay, thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? And that's a no. Okay, so moving on to the minutes. To approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 11th of March 2025. A copy is attached to the agenda pack. We've all read them, I presume. And can I have a proposer? Councillor Cupp and a seconder, Councillor Curry. And you're all happy for me to sign them off? Do you all agree? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 4, which is a Cabinet Member presentation for this month. So this came around because of a request to do a scrutiny review on the effects of the cost of living crisis in Thanet. So we've asked Councillor King, because that's her portfolio, to come and give us a presentation. So, over to you, Heather.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to the meeting. Poverty in Thanet is a really important issue. We all know that. I think it is important to say at the beginning that this is a very broad topic, and the way that Thanet Council responds to it is very broad as well, because it covers a lot of departments. The first slides I'm going to show are all about the statistics around Thanet. So we go on to the first one. This is just an age and ethnicity one. I'm sure for a lot of the slides, the information on there will be quite familiar to you, but I think it's really important background against what we do. So deprivation, as you will see, and as I say, as I'm sure you already know, we are ranking very high for income, employment, education and skills deprivation and crime. Slightly better on health and disability, but still way up the top for it, and better again on living environment and barriers to housing and services. Thanet ranks 34th out of 317 LAs. What is it?
It's written on the bottom of your thing. It's indices of multiple
deprivation. Indices of multiple deprivation. And this is a measure used to assess the level of deprivation the area lies in. And so, as I say, I'm sure you're familiar really with the issues that this raises. I'm sure you're also aware that life expectancy in Thanet is worse than many other areas, and there's really quite a big difference in that. In actual fact, we have a 20-year, if you look at the inequality in little box, the blue box, we have almost a 20-year difference in the 10% of most deprived areas to the 10% least deprived areas. And as I say, so Thanet ranks quite highly in there, which is really quite a shocking statistic when you think about it. In this day and age. So infant and maternal health, infant mortality in Kent is consistently lower than the national rate. However, this typically isn't a significant difference, but it's particularly stark for Black and Asian women. and women from more deprived areas are dying, and this continues to increase. In 2020, women were 3 times more likely to die by suicide during or up to 6 weeks after the end of pregnancy compared to 2017 to 2019. And that's 1.5 women per 100,000 giving birth, which again is really quite a shocking issue. Obviously, we know we've had problems with maternity services in the area, and the hospital have put in quite robust measures to address that, but it is still an issue in the area. Educational attainment and pupil absence. In Kent, there was a general trend of increased attainment from 2011 to 2019. It wasn't recorded during the pandemic, and the latest figures show reduced attainment. Learning loss for disadvantaged pupils has consistently been greater than for pupils overall, and as a result, the gap in attainment has grown since 2019. The disadvantage gap index may lead to increased disadvantage if not addressed, and significant missing future earnings for those affected. So absences of all kinds, including authorised, have increased post-COVID, and this is Kent data. This slide focuses on the children worst affected persistently, 10% or more of sessions missed, and severely 50% or more of sessions missed for absent children. Trends are similar between Kent and England. The overall percentage of persistent absences in Kent increased in 21-22 by 10.9% from the 2020 to 21 figures. The overall percentage of severe absentees in Kent increased in 21-22 by 0.6% from 2021, from 1.2 to 1.8%. Children eligible for free school meals are more than twice as likely to be persistently absent than those not eligible for free school meals, and more than 4 times as likely to be severely absent. The ethnic groups with the highest proportion of persistent and severe absentees are Irish travellers, Gypsy Roma, and those with the lowest proportions are Chinese, and the total of black ethnic groups. So it's quite a mixed picture, but we certainly see the impact of poverty on educational attainment. Childhood obesity. The prevalence of excess weight in Thanet's Year R children decreased slightly from 2019 to 2020, from 25.8 to 24.3%, but that's still a quarter of all children. Obesity also decreased slightly from 11.3% to 10.5%, and severe obesity increased from 2.5% to 3.5%. And most of these values are higher than the Kent average. So again, obesity, which we know leads to future health problems, is worse in Thanet than in many other areas in Kent. And I think when you look at the statistics, if you compare Thanet with Sevenoaks, which is always right at the top of all these figures, because it's the least deprived area, then you see the differences that makes in all these aspects, in things like obesity, in things like educational attainment, and the impact that all these things have. So families in poverty. Children living in low-income families has increased by 5% in Kent since 2015. Children in low-income families, for example, in Newington is 32%, and in Kingsgate 7.9%. So even within Thanet, as we all know, there are areas where they're much less deprived than the most deprived areas, and that again continues to be reflected in health and education. So if we go on to overcrowding, according to the 2021 census, an average of 5.9% of households in Thanet have fewer rooms than required. By electoral ward, this rises to 12.8% in Margate Central and 15.1% in Cliftonville East. There were 4 other wards between 6 and 9%, with the remainder all being below the Thanet average. In terms of bedrooms, 3.7% of households in Thanet qualify as overcrowded, rising to 7.2% in Dane Valley, 7.5% in Margate Central, and 8% in Cliftonville West. Newington closely follows this. Dane Valley sits at 6.8, with 5 other wards also being slightly above the Thanet average. Thanet sits below the England average, but slightly above the Kent averages. So the England averages, rooms 6.44%. Oh, sorry. Lost my slide now. Which, overcrowding, sorry. Bedrooms 4.37% and Kent averages for rooms are 5.36%. Respiratory illnesses. And this is smoking prevalence according to the GP patient survey. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease admissions reduced sharply in the financial year ending 2021 due to the effect of the COVID pandemic, but admission rates increased in the following financial year, although they were still below the pre-pandemic levels. If we go on to healthy eating and physical health, nationally, prevalence of obesity is 10% higher in the most deprived communities, and the gap between the most and least deprived is growing. COVID-19 had a noticeable effect in reducing physical activity in Kent, decreasing walking for travel by around 37%, but increasing walking for leisure by 24%. In the years between 2016 and 2021, cycling has decreased in Kent by 24% overall. According to the Active Life survey, 53.4% of children and young people in Kent are not active enough, and that's 0.6% above the national average. So there's a lot that we are doing, and we'll go through that a bit in the later slides, to address some of these issues. But all this just builds up to the general picture of how far behind Thanet is in some of these things. We also know that we've got quite a lot of mental health problems and long waiting lists for mental health treatment, and that is a national thing, but certainly it's an issue that affects us locally as well. And the prevalence of depression in Kent increased from 6.4% in 2013 to 14 to 14.6% in 21 to 22. So really quite a stark increase. And following on from this, when we look at suicide and alcohol admissions, suicide rates in Thanet have been significantly higher than England rates since 2014 to 16, with the exception of the 2017 to 19 period. And we've also got a high level of alcohol admissions to hospital. Loneliness, which obviously also marries in with the depression and mental health issues. But across England, 45% of adults report feeling lonely, which when you think that's just under half of adults nationally, that again is quite shocking. Around 30,000 of those aged 65 or over in Kent may suffer from acute loneliness. And a case in point was the 58-year-old Sheila Cialoni from Peckham in London, who died in 2019, but her body was not discovered for 2.5 years. And the fact that no one could miss someone, no one could even be aware that they weren't seeing someone for that huge length of time is a real indictment on society today. This was obviously in London, but I think we know from the work of social prescribers and organisations like that, that loneliness is a huge problem, and in particular for the elderly, but also for other age groups. So that's the sort of backdrop of the issues that create poverty or are linked to poverty in the area. And then the call for this presentation was to look at how we as a council are addressing these issues. And so the first slide on this part of the presentation looks at neighbourhoods and how we're looking to work with this to alleviate some of the impact of poverty. So we've got some great initiatives around sports, which also then link into the health issues that I've already highlighted. And one of them in particular is to train coaches from the community to deliver multi-sport sessions. And this is something that people from the community can volunteer for and be trained to deliver. So it's a real peer-to-peer initiative. We've also got the multi-agency task force, which, as it says, is multi-agency, but really looks at ways that we can support people. So it's not just sort of, although police are involved in it, it's not just policing the area, but it's reducing the risk to young people is one of the issues they really work on. To help them stop being drawn into county lines activity and things like that. Young people, and all ages, but need to be aware of the risks and how to ameliorate them in their own lives. It also looks at supporting people experiencing domestic violence, for example, and how they can access support for it. 300 safeguarding referrals were made. Now, safeguarding covers a wide range of issues: child protection, adult protection, radicalisation, child sexual exploitation, female genital mutilation, domestic homicide reviews, gangs, cuckooing, trafficking and modern-day slavery, and also community tension. So there is a suicide prevention strategy that we have, and we're also leading on the Baton of Hope, a suicide prevention initiative, to raise awareness of it and also to help people access support as they need it. So you can see from the slide the huge range of things that we are doing, I'd say particularly in sports, but also in community neighbourhood work to try and lessen the impact. So if we look at the project initiative, then we've got lots of initiatives around safety for young people, particularly at night. So the Ask Angela or Andrew drink spiking awareness, gym safe, hotel watch. Also lots of work about violence against women and girls, and one of the things that has happened in the past is the self-defence workshops, which I think are run on quite a regular basis. Empowering women through sport and physical activity, such as Thanet Girls Can. Empowering young people through community events like Park Life, and Thanet Games for families of all ages can take part in that. Lots of community engagement work and working with the community to find out what their issues and fears are and how we can address them. Education and the knife crime programme and amnesty bins and the work in schools, the ladder of risk and that we do, all are to try and ameliorate some of these effects that people have when they're living in a deprived area. And in addition, we've got the Thanet Youth Council, and consistently when the members of the Youth Council have been asked what their biggest issue is, it's about feeling safe and keeping safe. So that's something that we are working on and they are working on to look at how they can spread the message really amongst their peers of the issues that we've got and the way that they're being addressed. If we look at housing, Then from the earlier slides, we know that housing has a huge impact on people. Where there's overcrowding, it's difficult for young people to study. Where there's poor quality housing, then that's not the, studying and attainment isn't necessarily the first thing on people's minds. So there's lots of initiatives that we are doing to address the housing issues we have in the area. For a start, Citizens Advice in Thanet are given a grant by Thanet Council because we recognise the advice they give is invaluable to residents, and so we want to support that work. But there's also large amounts of money that is distributed through the Household Support Fund. We are building new homes, and 49 new homes will be delivered between December 25 and February 26. These are council houses. We've already invested in temporary accommodation so that we can bring back people that were out of area for housing, because we know how disruptive that is for particularly children and young people, but for families as a whole, and the impact it has on employment. If being out of area means someone loses a job, then that pushes them further into poverty. We've supported families to claim pension credit where they're eligible, so we had a campaign highlighting that to people and made direct representations to people in need to actually help them to claim it. We had the RISE team supporting those rough sleeping, and the Tenant and Leaseholder Services Financial Wellbeing team, because we need to look at making sure our tenants are managing their budgets as best they can and are accessing all the support and help they're entitled to. So there is the Household Support Fund, and this gives you a breakdown of how the money was paid out in Thanet. The Household Support Fund is a government grant to provide crisis support to vulnerable households with costs of essentials. So it's administered through Kent County Council that keep a proportion and then give some to local authorities like Thanet District Council to administer for different support awards, and you can see the range of them through there. So we know this doesn't solve everyone's problems, but we do want to make sure that people are accessing the support that is available and are aware of it. So we've got, again, figures, and I mean, you'll have these slides, so we've got figures on the sorts of awards that were made. And an example of this is Age UK used some of the fund to deliver hot Christmas dinners on Christmas Day and Boxing Day to people who were housebound or isolated. Another example is the Riverside Housing Association. They door-knocked on tenants that had not had engagement with them, and in one case they were able to assist a lady with carpets and essential items as she'd been living without these for some time due to not being aware of the support available. And so I think that's one message we need to take from this, that we need to look at how we raise awareness of all these schemes that are there to help people, how we get to the people that most need them, that may be the most difficult to reach. And I think as councillors, then we have a big role in being aware of our communities and doing that. So then obviously we've had huge amounts of money in Thanet in regeneration and growth funding, and we've got projects within the Pathfinder programme that were developed on the back of significant stakeholder and community engagement, with the ambition of increasing economic opportunity, job creation and providing support to specific sectors such as tourism and hospitality, creative and culture and green industries. And one of the things we know with poverty is there can be all sorts of different funds and initiatives to address it, but the root cause is a lack of income, and the only way out of that is really through helping people through educational attainment and into employment and providing the right sorts of jobs. One of the problems we have in Thanet is we have a low-skilled workforce. We have insecure jobs, zero-hour contracts, minimum wage jobs, and to help people to support themselves and, you know, to lift them out of poverty, we need to create better jobs. Now, obviously, this is not something that Thanet Council can do on its own, but it certainly is these kind of initiatives and looking at what opportunities there are that we can build up the area. Then obviously one of the things that is important is the benefits and making sure that people are claiming all those that they are entitled to, which again is about education for people, so that they know not only what they're entitled to but how to claim it. Housing benefit is only for pensionable aged people and those living in supported or temporary accommodation. Everyone else receives it as part of universal credit. Discretionary housing payment, someone must be in receipt of housing benefit or the housing element of universal credit, and it's a fixed sum of money. And council tax support for working age people is set by Thanet Council, and pensionable age is set by legislation. The maximum Thanet District Council can set is 90%, so all working age people must pay at least 10% of council tax. And then the final slide is just a thank you, because obviously from what we've covered here, a huge amount of work from Thanet Council goes into these initiatives from all these different people and their teams, and I think it's worth recognising how broad the topic is, how many people are involved in initiatives to address it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor King. Excellent presentation. And yeah, as you say, a wide-ranging subject. There's so many aspects of it, and I think it's something to be mindful when we're setting up our scrutiny review, where we look at what aspect we're going to take. I think if we looked at the whole thing, then it's going to take months and months and months to do a scrutiny review. So I think we'll talk about that in we'll talk about that when we come to the work programme. Sorry, Heather.
I just wanted to say, because it does cover such huge areas, that if people are interested in a particular topic from one that I've covered here, then obviously it can come back as a specific topic to scrutiny, rather than just this broad brush presentation that I have done.
Yeah, I totally agree. As I say, yeah, I think we'd be doing a review for months and months and months if we just did the whole thing. So yeah, maybe we will look at certain aspects, but we'll touch on that in a minute. Members, right, have we any questions, any comments to make? Councillor Scobie?
Thank you very much, and thanks for the presentation. The question I sort of had was, obviously, nationally the picture is that poverty is going up. It has done for the last sort of 10, 15 years, unfortunately, and those figures don't seem to be reversing at the moment. Are we seeing that the specific Thanet initiatives we've done, things like, you know, going back, the sort of the Live Margate, the task force, some of the stuff that you went through, has that made a difference over the last decade in us relative to other areas? I know we benchmark ourselves against other similar councils. Have those initiatives, even if poverty in general is going up, has that helped bring down us relatively? I can remember, for instance, that Margate Central and Cliftonville West were always in the top 5 most deprived wards in the entire country year after year. That doesn't seem, obviously still up there, but we seem relatively to its change. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And I think if you look at some of the initiatives that we've done, we can show benefit locally, but obviously the broader picture is still that we are a deprived area, and against the national backdrop of poverty increasing, you know, cost of living problems for people and families increasing, then that's where we are too.
And then there's just one stat that completely threw me. It probably is of interest to a couple of members as well. That Cliftonville East is the most overcrowded. That sort of threw me a little bit. Do we think that's a odd bit of data, or is that related to the number of one-bedroom properties on the Palm Bay estate or something? Is lack of rooms? I couldn't really follow that statistic, sorry.
I'd have to go back to KCC and find that out. So I can find out and go back to you. Yeah.
Councillor Austin.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Keane. That was really interesting. Quite shocking in many respects, obviously. But first thing is, can we have the slides? Because all that data is really invaluable. And thank you so much to all the officers who put all that together. That's brilliant. I wanted to ask, I can see there's a lot of activity around sport for health. Is there other activity that our officers are engaged in that's more directly with the health service? Or are we doing that sort of work through intermediaries, through social prescribing and those kinds of things? Does that make sense as a question?
Do you mean actually working with the NHS and with GPs? Yeah, we do. So we're part of Thanet Health Alliance. In fact, I'm joint chair with a GP of the actual group, and that's working across all sectors to focus on our two areas that we're currently focusing on, are frailty and mental health. So we are working with the services, and then we obviously have something called which I didn't even think to put on the slides. This is we do so much that we just don't necessarily cover. East Kent Wellbeing and Health Partnership, which is East Kent local authorities, the Director of Public Health, and other agencies on how we can tackle something. So yeah, we definitely are.
And if I can just add to that, in my cabinet role, I'm also a member of the Kent, KCC Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that's where we're really drilling down into what's happening at the local hospitals and with GPs as well, but the local health services through that, and trying to address some of these issues and make sure that we have up-to-date statistics, which is where, for example, we're updated on the actions being taken in maternity services.
I suppose the other thing I want to say, which is the thing I always say, is how can we as members get more involved in this, and how can we find out more about things that are going on? Because there's a great lists of initiatives that we're involved in as a council, and some of them I recognise, but lots of them I don't. How can we find out more, and how can we get more involved in supporting this and in feeding information in both directions, information to our residents about what's available and information to officers about residents who may be in need or benefit from support?
In terms of how to find out about it, actually there's a huge amount of information on the Thanet District Council website. It's not, I don't find, the easiest website to negotiate, so sometimes you have to know what you're looking for. But for example, if you go there and look up Active Thanet, a lot of these initiatives that I've referenced in the presentation, details are on there, the same with the youth council and things like that, but you kind of have to know what you want to look at. I'll pass over to Penny now, she might have more suggestions.
So I can't comment on the website, not my domain, but the work that the Community Safety Partnership are doing, I know that they're now looking to send out the emails directly to you when they're happening, so that should be coming through. And in terms of any feedback, through to the Margate Task Force, multi-agency task force, that's old habits. And then, they'll focus on those people to the generic email, and then someone will pick it up.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a very thorough report, Heather. It covers a lot of areas, so I'm going to try and sort of zone in on a couple of focal points rather than cover everything, because there's a lot of problems, as we can see, but I do think we have to be careful of running ourselves down, because there's also a lot of positives in this community that we really need to be highlighting. A couple of things rattled with me, particularly respiratory problems, because Thanet has had a massive instance of an East Kent, but Thanet in particular, of COPD, emphysema and breathing related disorders statistically for some time now, which is really of some concern. There there's the fact that cyclohexanone, for instance, is a cause of COPD and these respiratory problems, and that's what Sericol were dumping into our aquifers from the 60s until they were caught out in the 90s. Issues like these are still ongoing. I know there's remedial work been going on those aquifers, they've been switched off and so on, but the statistics we are looking at, I believe, are also the heritage of some of the abysmal lack of enforcement and things that have gone on in the past and stuff that's been allowed to happen. Now, I'm not suggesting we have a post-mortem, I'm just explaining that, you know, we've got more care than ever for the environment, we should be more aware than ever. However, we still have the debacle, for instance, of half of Ramsgate being buried under fine silica dust blowing up from Brett's, but when we ask for monitoring, we don't get adequate monitoring. But maybe these are issues we can bring back here, but it's a very concerning statistic that we're still in that position. Likewise, we have people that politic about the state of mental health provision in East Kent, which is absolutely horrendous. We have the well-documented issues with the beacon and the people that run it and everything. And yet we have a suicide rate, 50% of that statistic, higher than the average. I think that's incredibly damning, and we need to look at our forward work programme as a committee as to how we can help identify where the problem is. I suspect it may be one of resource as well, because I'm aware, and I'm very involved with a few people in that sector, and I am well aware of very vulnerable people that regularly have appointments cancelled because it doesn't suit their calendar or agenda or whatever, people at risk of suicide and so on. But if we've got an instance of 50% over the national average, then I think it's all of our duty to start asking questions and looking at why and how. Somebody's responsible somewhere for a lack of care there, in my opinion, but again, whatever we can do to help on that, I think we should be doing. And as a committee, if we can take a lead on that in our future work, then I think we need to consider that. With regard to law and order, there is this beat officer for each ward system brought in by the Police and Crime Commissioner. It doesn't seem to have been implemented to the degree that one would have hoped. I'm pleased to see that now it's being adopted nationally, so Kent leads the way again. But I would say anything we can do to ask them to step up. Could we get beat officers or perhaps the chief of police in to explain why 2 years ago we had dialogue with them? We've had a change of beat officer, and I wouldn't even be able to tell you the guy's name at the moment, or girl, whoever it may be. So, you know, resource, and I know that additional resource was made available to Thanet's police to make sure that this policy was implemented. So again, anything we can do to look at that, maybe we should be. And thank you for your indulgence. I'm sorry to go on. However, social housing, 67 new houses in the last year with 49 in construction. I'm extremely confused because we keep getting publicity saying we've bought hundreds of houses. All I'll ask is, which is it? But 67 with 49 in construction doesn't make any sense to me, given the figures that we're supposed to be buying from developers with 106 money. And to sum up, thank you for your indulgence. However, there is a solution to most of these problems, and that's regeneration, jobs, proper income, money in people's pockets, pride in themselves, and a sense of mental security that they can provide for themselves. And there's only one way we're going to do that, and that's to stop messing around with various creative thoughts, and it's to start getting industry jobs and proper employment in the area. But thank you for your indulgence, and that's my feedback.
Did you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. I mean, obviously, you raised, you know, quite a lot of different issues there, and I will pass over to officers in particular for comments on the housing. But before I do so, I'd like to add some other things. I mean, for the police officers, you say that you haven't seen that, but I understand because they were going to appoint 23 beat officers, and I understand they're nearly there in the recruitment of them. So I'm not quite sure why you're not seeing that happen, but it's certainly what I've been told in terms of it, and you can attend the IPC meetings and hear updates on what they're doing about policing in the area. So that might be a meeting you want to go to in future. The respiratory problems, I wasn't aware of the issue you talked about, but also with COPD, it's very much linked to poverty. I mean, we might have a particular historic issue in the area. It's not one I know anything about, but it will also be, for example, you know, smoking is more prevalent in poorer areas, and so, you know, that's going to be a behaviour that impacts on it. Obesity impacts on respiratory problems as well, and, you know, people being less active does. So it's all multifaceted. This comes together. Mental health, you know, I fully agree that we've got some real problems in the area and we need real work on it, and we do work with the health services to sort of highlight these problems and look at how we can address them, but it is a thorny issue. I'll hand over now for comment on the housing to Ashley. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I brought a report last month to Cabinet and Overview and Scrutiny, giving an update on the development and acquisitions. So the figure actually quoted in the report was that 67 units have been handed over. However, we have secured 343. They're in the various processes of being purchased and being built. And actually with the development, the 49 is our phase 4 development that's on site at the moment, Dame Valley Arms, Stanner, Clements and Dame Valley Arms, Stanner, Clements, I think that's it. And with the Highfield Road and the Eaton Place that we're proposing as well, that takes us over to 442 units in the pipeline. So that's where, I just wanted to clarify that's the figure that's coming from. So,
Councillor Pope.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up quickly about the respiratory diseases that lung cancer screening is being rolled out as the next NHS cancer screening programme, so hopefully that should help us in the future. And then I just wanted to speak about the Community Shield a bit. So at the Violence Against Women and Girls conference, we discussed the Community Shield, and I think there was a lot of support and people think it was a good idea, but nobody had heard of it. So yeah, just wanted to raise that I think there's support for it in the community, but maybe some work needs to be done to tell people about it. And also, I just wanted to ask, what is a 13A award? That was on the benefits thing.
Through you, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So section... It is, yeah. What she said. Yeah, it's section 13A of a particular part of some government legislation allows us to write off the council tax for people who are in particular hardship. They have to write to us in order to set out their income and expenditure profile, and if they've got certain circumstances, we can write that debt off. It's done on an exceptional basis. The threshold's quite high, and unfortunately, lots of the cases that are put forward for it, there are quite bleak and desperate cases. They are reviewed by officers, initially by officers within the Revenue Service, so Partnership 1. Their officers will review them, goes through 2 checks, one by a rents officer, then by the income officer, then by the council tax manager, and then it comes through to me for ratification.
Anybody else?
Thank you. It's a great report. I'm quite familiar with this data because when I worked for Charlton, I led on the funding, and this data enabled us to access funding, which I think is also something we need to look at, because when we gave feedback on the funding that went to Ellington Park, the guy that was talking to us actually said that we get less funding than somewhere like Sevenoaks, and that just isn't right. So somehow we have to enable experts out in the community to apply for funding, because we don't have the capacity within our own workforce, but there is expertise out there. It's interesting, the living environment is always remains the top of our our all-star thing. It's certainly why I moved here. But it's interesting, when I moved here in 2010, 2/3 of kids have never been to the beach, and I supported a young person who lived on the Newington estate, and I had to take him to Margate, and one day there were roadworks, so we went round the coast, and we're going past the Digby, and he says, are we still in Thanet? And I went, yes, you can cycle to here. So we definitely need to find ways of engaging young people into actually beach and sea activities. Might stop them jumping off the end of the pier, because we've got plenty of sea and beach there. Also, a bit of data that wasn't there was 45% of Thanet kids that are excluded from school end up in prison. I mean, if I'm an ex-teacher, if that isn't a piece of data that should be telling us we need to invest in our schools, I don't know what is. Vaping's not mentioned, because I really have concerns that we have no idea of the long-term impact of vaping. We can certainly see it in terms of litter on our streets. Some of these are just comments. Also, I mean, I think when the travellers arrived at the port, it ended up being an extended period of time, and we certainly learnt a lot. And I think one of the things that we learnt is if we can find our travellers, Roma, gypsies, a permanent site here, then we stand a good chance of getting them into school. We certainly had 3 of them in school, and actually Kent agreed to allow them to repeat a year in junior school, which is unheard of. In my 26 years of teaching, that only ever happened once because of funding. So we need to remember that when that decision comes, we need to put all possible effort into finding a home, a site for this group of our community. And then, it doesn't work in weeks. This is a generational change, and it is centred around education. It's not going to happen overnight. The other thing I also think is really important, the violence against women and girls, is really important that we continue those workshops with girls. But we must keep reminding ourselves the offenders are mainly men and boys. So I'd certainly like to see some programmes where we're targeting young people maybe and men in workshops and confronting them with their behaviours that make girls and women feel at risk and are at risk out in our community. And the last thing I'd like to say, there's 20 million coming into Ramsgate, a huge amount of money. How is this data informing what we do? So, for instance, the clock house. And I'm just picking that, I could have picked something else. How is the clock house development going to help address some of these issues? And do we use this data to inform our practice going forward in terms of that spend of 20 million? I'm just making comments, really.
Okay, you've got a lot of points again. So I'll answer some of them. I think Penny might want to come in on some of them as well. But one of the points you made was about, using the coastline, and especially for activities. Well, we had a whole series of programmes in the Coastal Wellbeing Initiative that was doing just that, and also with some of the regeneration money, like we've got the development at Walpole Bay, again trying to bring these activities to the seafront, which is a great asset to us as an area, and also a great place for people to get outdoors, be active, and all the rest of it. In terms of the larger regeneration money, then obviously, again, it's multifaceted initiatives, but some of them, yes, there are some heritage aspects to it, but there are also a lot about regeneration in terms of bringing more jobs, more skills to the area, and more activity, the coastal skate park, for example. So, yes, some of it is about heritage assets, but a lot of it is about wider either health benefits or employment and financial benefits for people. With regard to the vaping, I mean, Penny might know different, but I wonder if it's simply about not having the data yet, that because it's a relatively new phenomenon, unlike smoking, that we perhaps don't have as much long-term data. And certainly I take your points about the violence against women and girls, and we are looking at all aspects of how we tackle this as an issue, and it will be ongoing work. But Penny, you might like to come in.
Yeah. I can just briefly come in on the vaping. So there is no data at the moment, which is something that I think we all share a concern around. However, there might not be any data, but we are tackling vaping in terms of the illicit side of it. So when we talk about illicit tobacco work, we work closely with trading standards about stopping that flow of the vapes that have tobacco in them that don't say they have it in. They have all sorts of other chemicals in, and are mixed with very, yeah, I dread to think what they're mixed with. But that also goes for cigarettes as well. So we work with trading standards do the testing, and then we do the shutting down of the premises as and when. So we have a few that we've done recently. So yeah, that's an ongoing work stream, shall we say. And in terms of the VORG staff working with perpetrators, Kent County Council procure the assistance for people who are domestically abused. They are doing a piece of work because nothing had been developed that specifically works with perpetrators. So they're doing a piece of work this year to design something to work with perpetrators. But we are also doing a piece of work that I can't go into too many details at the moment, but it works about being in their shoes. So you look at how somebody feels, how they react when they are put in certain situations, and you will be put in that lived situation. So yeah, that's a piece of work that's coming forward at the moment with some quite interesting partners. We're really excited when that finally comes forward, but yeah. No problem.
Councillor Cowie.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Heather, for your presentation. I just thought I would mention an invisible issue that was flagged up, and it's loneliness. 45%, it's a really high figure. I just hope that the council and they can do all they can to support community groups, Age UK, and to help with that. It's a really high figure, and the loneliness can lead to other issues, and it's an invisible one. So yeah, it's something we don't normally think about.
I would absolutely agree with that, and I mean there are a huge number of community groups that are working very hard to alleviate loneliness and to build community and to build community activities to do that, but it is a big problem.
Councillor Frugi.
Thank you so much for the report and for giving us the information, all the initiatives. There's a huge raft of medical evidence that in terms of building healthier and thereby wealthier communities, that the very best thing you can do for a child's long-term mortality and morbidity is actually teach them from a very early age basic literacy, and then from that follows on health literacy, and from that follows on making healthy choices. And it's really interesting. This isn't just about their social and mental health. This is actually about their physical long-term health. So my colleague was talking about COPD. In fact, if someone doesn't have 20-pack years of smoking behind them, they're very unlikely to develop those kind of significant lung diseases. And if they are better educated when they're very young, they're much less likely to take up smoking to the extent where they would do it so that it would actually damage their lungs. So I'm wondering about what sort of programs might be available in terms of getting into schools early. I know that we expect schools to do it already, but is there anything that we have in mind that would help encourage that?
So in any specific area, because we go into schools quite early, but any particular?
It's actually basic literacy is where the evidence is. So actually teaching children early in terms of their basic literacy, which actually follows on for their health literacy. So it's basically encouraging that, but combined with healthy choices, very young. And I'm talking like from 4 years old, really young, helps you make those decisions, all which have a spiral effect all the way up through as they age.
Yeah, so we don't do anything regarding literacy, because obviously that would be led by KCC as the education authority, but it's definitely something we can take forward and discuss with them.
Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Keane, for that really interesting presentation. And I think it was incredibly, one statistic, especially for me, was in relation to the decrease of life expectancy, when quite often you hear the thing of, I'll move too close to the sea and you can live longer, which is always quite surprising to see that. I just want to follow on from the comment that Councillor Curry made in relation to the loneliness side, and I think it's something that is quite poignant at the moment. I had a resident come and speak to me at one of our surgeries recently in relation to the issue that you highlighted, where someone unfortunately passed away and then they weren't found. And actually, there are things around it that you can have a full fob, where obviously you can have it around your neck and click it, and it's around the stigma of wearing one, and that it isn't too cool, if you like, to wear one when you're out and about. But I wondered if there was anything that we could do as a council to try and help promote those kind of things, because obviously when people are by themselves and they do have a fall, it is very hard for them to be able to get to a phone or something. But if they have one of those devices set up, if they could just press the button, and then help can be on the way. Thank you.
I mean, I'm not sure what we can do in particular as a council. Penny might have some ideas about that. But again, I do know there are lots of community initiatives and groups that do exactly that. And for example, Age UK will assess people and find out and make sure they've got you know, a call fob if they need one, if they're likely to have falls, and also refer them to the fire service to make sure they've got smoke detectors in place and things like that. So there's a huge amount of work going on in the community. As I say, I'm not sure what Thanet Council's role in that is, other than, again, making sure people are aware of the services they can access. But I will pass over to Penny.
So we don't specifically at the moment advertise those services for people. We do work with Age UK and with some of the other local charities that specifically work with older people to try and promote things like that. We do, however, have pebbles that we can give out to people that track you. So if people are wandering and then can't be found, that's a good way of just giving a bit of safeguard for some people that may have dementia or Alzheimer's, so they can be tracked. And they've become quite popular recently. So I think that's something we will invest in more. But I think actually there is that aspect of the lifeline type thing that we can definitely promote as being a positive thing. I know that my CCTV team would very much like to expand what they are able to deliver, which would be services like the Lifeline. I'm looking at the boss. We'd like some more money to develop that. But yeah, so we would like to try and move that forward so we could have something very local. But yeah, there are lots of things available in the East Kent area, but we will definitely look to promote them more.
Anybody else? Are we all done? Okay, just leaves me to thank you, Heather, for that presentation. Fantastic. And we move on to item number 5, which is the review of the Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme for 24-25. So we are going to hear from Councillor Bright about her scrutiny review in a little while, but we need to look to set up the next one. I've got Councillor Davis.
Could I remind the committee of the commitment of the leader at the recent full council, I believe it was, when Councillor Pugh raised the issue of an a lease and asset disposal scrutiny panel?
Clearly we got a table of other subjects, but yeah, I was going to highlight that and ask members if they wanted a fast track one for the next one, but this is we're already in the process of setting up this one now about the cost of living crisis, so it'll be a couple of months down the line before we get to that.
I understand that, but if I could highlight the fact that it is probably quite important as well, given local government reorganisation and the direction of travel, that we have that oversight of what is actually going on there to make sure that there's balance in the system. So.
Well, if I can get members' approval, then we'll be the next one. If that's
just wanted it on the.
If that's what we want to do.
Wanted to make sure it was on the table. Thank you.
I was just going to speak on the poverty one, because obviously we've just had an excellent presentation. But there were a couple of times during that discussion, we could very much have veered off topic and had arguments about all sorts of various national issues that nobody here on TDC or any of us as councillors can really change. We could have a proper political knockabout, which I don't think would be helpful to anyone. So I think when the scope of that working group is pulled together, I think that needs to be really focused, and I think needs to be probably focused on what TDC can actually do, not necessarily what's going on outside, because I think that could easily break down into something quite negative.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, as you were all talking, I wrote down a few things that most of it is around health and well-being, to be honest. I don't know if I think that's where you're going to concentrate, because especially with mental health, whether there's stuff that Thanet Council can do, or you can push other agencies to do more along those lines. I don't know whether if everyone's agreed with that, but I mean, that would be for the panel when we set that up. I mean, I was going to ask for volunteers. Obviously, it was David Green's suggestion, so I'm going to put him in it as well. So if we've got another 4 volunteers. Inundated.
I think everyone's exhausted with the election, Chair.
Yeah, I think... yeah, if you'd all bear that in mind. Obviously, I think it would be a very interesting scrutiny. I know there's a few of us here who are, including myself, we're on election mode, so yeah, we'll come back to that. But I think if we go down that route, I think health and well-being is where we want to be. Does everyone agree with that? Okay, perfect. And then we all agreed that we put in the commercial leases, tenancies as the one after that.
No.
No.
No. Us.
This is from your leader?
No, I was saying let's put it in the middle. I was just going to...
I need to put it on the table.
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
so we'll put it on the table and we can discuss it.
And I was just going to ask if, as a potential cabinet presentation, it might be good to get either the leader or Councillor Duckworth to come and talk from an economic regeneration perspective. There's been a lot of talk around year-round economy. And obviously we did the tourism working party, which I think was really good. But I think there's the other part of it, what happens when the sun's not shining and what more can be done and making the economy more resilient. So I was thinking it might be good to get a presentation. I don't know who the correct cabinet member would be. It might be good to get a presentation, and then that might be a future scrutiny topic where we might be able to add some value in terms of getting input from businesses and council officers working on this and potentially putting something together.
I'm sure who we've got. Have we got anybody lined up for next month? Okay, so we'll... Have we got any more suggestions for cabinet presentations? Should have all had a Red Bull before you come tonight.
Oh no, I could go to sleep actually. I'd quite like the estates team to come back, because I thought we'd started some really... I thought we'd had one presentation, and actually my feeling is that we have moved forward quite a lot under Bob's tenure, and it would be quite nice to have an update, because I know there was a big mess. It was quite a large thing to unpick. So it would be nice at some point to bring Andrea back to get... Commercial properties? Well, yeah, we've got commercial properties, haven't we, as estates.
Yeah, I mean, we'll leave that for a few months, we'll be ready to do that next scrutiny review, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd also previously suggested that once we'd finished the budget year, which is just done, I thought it might be good for us, as it is part of our role, to actually talk about the year that's just gone, because we sort of get into a cycle where I'm sure Mr. Blundell is already talking budgets for next year, and there'll be chambers going on over the sort of the summer. It might be good to get Councillor Yates over the next couple of months and say, how did we do against what we said we were going to do? I don't think that goes to any committee. Obviously, we have the quarterly Treasury reports, but it might be good to have a presentation to say, we thought we were going to spend this, what did we actually spend, and what are the reasons? It'd be good to get, as a scrutiny committee, that zoomed out look at it.
I quite like that as well, yeah. So I'll get an email sent out to Councillor Yates and Councillor Duckworth, see who's available next month, and see if they can put something together in that short period. Excellent. And obviously we'll put the commercial tenancy thing on the timetable as well. Okay, anybody more suggestions? Are we all done for now? Okay, we move on to item number 6. Quite an unusual subject, because we don't think we've ever covered anything like this. Petition appeal paper. I call on Nick.
Thank you, Chair. So, the Council received a petition signed by 1,225 people regarding antisocial behaviour in Cliftonville and across Thanet, and this petition was rejected by the Council as it didn't meet the parameters of the Council's petition scheme. I won't read out the prayer, but the prayer is outlined in the report of paragraph 2.1. The Council rejected the petition as the petition didn't state what action the petitioners wished the Council to take, and that doesn't meet, and the petition itself doesn't meet this requirement. So petitions will usually start with a phrase such as, "We, the undersigned, petition the Council to do X, Y, Z," some sort of specific action that those signing the petition wish the Council to undertake on their behalf. The petitioner then, as they are fully entitled to, requested that the Council review that decision, and as per the Council's petition scheme, the review process is via a report to this panel, hence why we're talking about it now. The reasons for the reviewer can be the reasons for the review from the provisioner can be summarised at the petition prayer outlining what was requested was included in the covering letter, and so it wasn't actually missing at all. And that Thanet Council's constitution is not part of statute, and what particular powers in law did TDC have to reject the petition. So in response to those points, Democratic Services would argue that the 1,225 people putting their names to the wording of the petition, they didn't put their names to the covering letter. And whilst that may come across as slightly pedantic, it's a fundamental part of what a petition is. People sign a petition based upon the prayer that's in front of them, not in an accompanying letter, unfortunately. It's the same reason why a prayer can't be then added to a petition or changed in the petition after you've collected the signatures, because that's not what those people have actually signed up to. With regards to the second point, there's actually, surprisingly enough, no requirement for a council to have a petition scheme or to even accept petitions. Amazingly enough, that requirement was repealed by the Localism Act 2011, and as such, without there being any proper statute, the council is free to design its own petition scheme. That's the scheme that we have. It's in the council's constitution. That's regularly reviewed, and that's detailed in paragraph 3.4.3 of the report. I think I'd also just like to take the opportunity to emphasise that in rejecting the petition, this is in no way a reflection of the council's view on the important issues that this person has raised via their petition. The council absolutely takes those issues seriously, and again, that's detailed in the petition. And I would take this opportunity to strongly urge anyone considering putting a petition to the council to come and contact Democratic Services before going out to collect signatures. We can help you draft your prayer. We've got sheets for you to collect that clearly help you set out signatures. We can advise you on linking into change.org or 38 Degrees, I think is the other one. But yeah, so we can really help you so we can avoid having these sorts of issues moving forwards, because obviously we appreciate the fact that people go to a lot of effort, and it's disappointing for everybody involved if you put the effort in to then find that your petition is not valid. So with regards to what we're actually talking about tonight, I draw the panel's attention to the paragraph in brackets at the bottom of paragraph 4.2a. So we're looking at how the council has administered the petition, not having a debate about the subject of the petition. So as I say, members councillors can look at the report, see if they agree with the way that the council has dealt with the petition, or if not, they can take some other action. But what I would say is you wouldn't be able to refer it to council because it hasn't reached that threshold, if that makes sense. If it got over 1,500, you could say, well, actually, you could refer it on to council because that would be the appropriate thing to do. If not, you could always refer it back to Dem Services, potentially saying we think you've been a bit stingy with the wording, or if you feel it's okay, we take no further action. I'm happy to take any questions. Wow, thank you.
Councillor Scobie first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. As you said, an unusual one. I've not seen this before. But I think it's clear that the process was followed as per the petition. And I think, you know, that as you're reading sort of the article, I remember seeing it initially, and we had a discussion as councillors when it first popped up. It was not really clear what it's asking for. I think, from my perspective as a scrutiny committee, I don't think there's anything we can add to it in terms of recommending this go anywhere. I do think there's a separate point around what happens from the petition side, because from my view, if over 1,000 people have come together and said that there's an issue, I get that our policy, you know, we have to follow a process on this, but I think for effectively, you know, to massively paraphrase, somebody's gathered all these signatures, got all this support, and then we've just said, computer says no, sorry. I do think there is an element that if somebody gets a petition above a certain amount of local people and we can see there's valid signatures, there should be at least a response from a cabinet member or somebody at the council or an officer, which I think is one of the steps within the with the scheme, within the petition procedure and the process. But this is sort of shown there might be a flaw in that, where somebody might have a valid petition in terms of the numbers of people, but what they haven't actually got a valid ask. But in this instance, this issue could have been resolved quite quickly by somebody just responding to them. And I'm aware, and you know, Councillor Curry's here, and there are other local councillors who've been working on this. I'm aware that TDC's been doing quite a lot on this, and there could have been quite an easy response and maybe taken some of the frustration out of this situation. So my suggestion, Chair, was that it might be something that Mr Hughes will pick up with the Constitutional Review Committee when we're reviewing petitions anyway, about what happens if there is a valid petition from the number of people that are actually doing it, but maybe the ask isn't clear, that there is still at least a response from a cabinet member, because if you've got that many local residents writing in about an issue, I think it's fair they get a response at as a minimum.
Yeah, totally. We do have a specific policy on petitions, then. You say that we haven't got an obligation to accept them. So do we have a policy on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The council has a petition scheme. It's part of the council constitution. It sets out what happens when we receive petitions, but there is no, what we're saying is there's no legal requirement for us to have that. If we didn't have a petition scheme, we could, if we wanted to, not that I'm suggesting we ever would do, but you could just simply say, oh, well, we'll treat every petition, even if it's signed by 100,000 people, the same way that we do it as a letter, as a piece of correspondence from a single person. So that's why we have the scheme, to emphasise the fact that we do take petitions very seriously and take matters seriously. And I do think, as I say, I think that would be a wise recommendation from the panel if they wanted to go that way, to recommend the issue back to constitutional review.
Am I right in thinking we're going to be reviewing petitions anyway? I think that was either in this year's scheme or it may be in the next one, because I remember we had this issue of petitions coming in between sort of the June-July meeting and the October meeting. We talked about how that response, and so I think we were going to look at, there were some gaps in the petition side anyway, so this could potentially feed into that, Chair, if we were comfortable with that as a panel.
So is there any guidance in that policy where we say what the wording should look like, or do we just leave it for the petitioner?
A person's petition is very much their viewpoint and asking people to share, but we do emphasise in there that we can assist people in developing the prayer and tweaking the prayer to make sure that if you go and collect it, you're not going to find this situation where we go, oh, well, actually, yeah, sorry, it should have said this, and we just reject it. If that computer says no, we will always try and help people design the prayer, even if it's something that is theoretically against what the council stands for, against the council priorities. We're not going to change your petition to make it so that it benefits the council. We'll make it so that it is valid. That's the point.
But once one person has signed that wording, then that, if that's not accepted, that wording can't be changed.
No, absolutely no, because you can't just, for the reasons we said earlier on.
Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Chair. I completely agree with Councillor Scobie in the sense that I don't overly think there's too much to comment on this because the process was correctly followed. My only comment as such, and I don't know if it's a recommendation or just a comment to be noted, is that I think that we should possibly take this as you said, Nick, there is a process in place in terms of the help that Democratic Service can give, and I don't know whether that is something that can be published or a press release can be taken from the back end of this decision to say, we appreciate that petitions are, people work hard to get petitions out there, we do actually offer this service, this is how you can access it, because I'll be honest, that's the first time that I've known that you offer that service as well if someone was to bring a petition. So I think possibly, is there a way to actually shout about that a little bit more through the newsletter or something along those lines? Thank you, Chair.
Oddly enough, I find us all in agreement to a degree this evening, because I take on board what Councillor Scobie said very much about, if there's more than 1,000 people, there's clearly a strength of sentiment. However, it's important we remember what a petition is and what a petitioner is, which is the person that establishes the prayer and then asks people to support their viewpoint. I mean, there was a flurry of petitions 3 or 4 years ago from community groups that the world and their wife, but the problem was half of them didn't even know that you needed, once you got all these people revved up, to actually present the petition. So taking on board what Councillor Cupp said, perhaps there's a way that we can be a little more proactive in the way we advise people, but even on the website, you know, flag it up. If you want to start a petition, follow these points, because democratic services, I know from past experience, are really helpful. But it is important because none of us, I'm sure, and the mayor and anybody that signs a petition would not expect that. But I'd be livid if I signed something and found it had been edited and changed afterwards. And it becomes an invalid and illegal, you know, unlawful, you know, certainly invalid document. And the prayer is vital. I mean, we could go back to the bad old days where there were no e-petitions. I remember coming in and agreeing a prayer with a former monitoring officer who then wrote to us 3 weeks later, assuming we'd produced 15,000 leaflets, demanding that the size of the font was changed. Would you believe in the prayer? Those days are gone, but there does need to be a formula, but anything we can do perhaps to make that clearer to people would help. So, because it is important that they follow that process, otherwise you could say that any number of people could just start screaming. And validation's important because, again, a lot of petitions are local, but you'll find that they're not necessarily local people commenting on it. So it is important that there's a process that pins it down.
Councillor Wilson.
I'd support what everybody else has said. I'm thoroughly behind Councillor Scobie's point about we need to get back to these people. We need them not to feel that their efforts are wasted. We have made really good progress in this council in the time that I've been a councillor in listening to what residents say, in making e-petitions available, in extending the number of words they can have for a question at council, so it's not an exercise in précis, it's actually a chance for them to ask a proper question and get an answer. We're trying very hard to make ourselves accessible and be a listening council, and this, I think, is part of this. So I think Democratic Services has acted entirely properly. I don't think any criticism at all attaches to them, but nor does it to the petitioner, in the sense that they couldn't really have been expected to know that. And I think the website is key here. The first thing I did was key in petitions on the website, and there's information, but it's very basic and it's rather legalistic in its language. If we could have something that says, if you're putting a petition into a council, it's got to sit in a particular format, and then a few bullet points, and please contact us at Democratic Services, we're keen to help. That would solve a lot of the problems. And yes, to Councillor Scobie's suggestion that we need to look at this through Constitutional Review Committee. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
I mean, following on from what everybody else has said, I think some examples would be good as well. Yes. And what I find it very difficult, the whole councillor wording is sometimes Russian to me, and you know, you have to find a way of dealing with it. But 1,225 people have, and you can, if I was to read that prayer as a teacher, out of that would become in desperation. This is a group of people who've been absolutely desperate, and you know, we all look at social media or on social media, so we know what's been happening on North Down Road. So, you know, rules are there to make things safe and fair. So I think we've acted in totally the proper way. But I definitely feel we need to reach out, and I definitely feel there needs to be some sort of multi-organisation, including the ward councillors, to try and develop an action plan going forward. We've sort of had a similar situation in Ramsgate Town Centre, and one of the things we set up quite early was a Ramsgate Crime Stoppers WhatsApp group, which has now got 28 people, a lot of businesses in various locations, and we religiously report crime via Crime Stoppers, which has engaged the police, and now we have a much better relationship with the police, and we do seem to be getting on top of it in our town centre. I mean, we're here to offer advice to anybody over what we've experienced in Ramsgate and how that might help North Down Road. One of the things it's done, the WhatsApp group, is we're all in it together. There's a feeling that we're not alone in trying to deal with what's happening out in our community. So yes, we've done the right thing, but we definitely need to reach out and try and develop some sort of action plan going forward.
We'll actually listen to the ward councillor right now. Councillor Coe.
Thanks, Chair. Some really good points from members, particularly Councillor Scobie. I agree with some of the comments made. What I would say is that Although the petition didn't meet the criteria, which is unfortunate, it was a really well petitioned, a well thought out petition. It didn't quite meet the criteria and it wasn't officially accepted. What was accepted by the council and the police, there was a problem, there is a problem. The council and the police are working very hard together to address these issues. I think that's the fact that should come out here, that work is being done and the petition was appreciated, and that's the main fact that comes through here.
So will they be writing a new petition, or are they quite happy now that things are being done?
That they could, but I think they have realised that things are being done in the area and minds were focused, which is always the point of a petition.
Councillor Scovey.
Yeah, I was just going to make some recommendations, Chair. So I was just going to recommend that we note the report and accept that the correct process was followed. That we request that Constitutional Review Committee looks at what happens to a petition that does meet the relevant threshold but is rejected. And I think with a view that there should be some sort of formal response included in the process. And third of all, picking up what Councillor Cupp said, that we ask Comms and Democratic Services to put something out about the petition and make it more prominent on the website so people don't experience this problem again, if people are happy with that.
Yep.
Moving on, item number 7, the Thanet Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, TCWIP. Ashley,
Thank you.
over to you.
The purpose of this report is to make Overview and Scrutiny Panel aware and make any recommendations necessary to Cabinet regarding the request to consult on the draft of the Thanet Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. The draft plan is the consolidation of nearly 3 years' work on developing a potential network of cycling and walking routes in the district, and this report sets out the need for and the recommendation to undertake wider public consultation on the draft plan. The consultation would enable the Council to gather wider public views on the draft plan, give greater weight to the adopted Thanet Whip, and provide essential support for ongoing bids for funding to deliver cycling and walking infrastructure in the district. It is important to consult on the draft Thanet Whip to ensure that local people and other key stakeholders can comment on the overall network strategy, as this will form the basis for future funding bids for scheme projects. The development of the draft plan has been informed by a significant level of engagement. Stakeholder groups, including councillors, met with Sustrains to help inform the initial urban audit in 2021. It is proposed to run the consultation for a period of 6 weeks, and we will be arranging in-person public engagement events across Thanet during this period. We will consult with key stakeholders. Overview and Scrutiny Panel are asked to recommend to Cabinet that the draft Thanet Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan is published for consultation for a period of 6 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Councillor Garner, did you want to speak? Under 20.1?
Yeah, just quickly. Thank you for the report. It's a very in-depth, detailed report. I remember when the whole process started 3 years ago by KCC, and I'm assuming this is one of a number of these type of reports in other districts across Kent, as part of KCC's long-term vision for Kent to make it safer for walkers and cyclists. I think the report, the paper introducing the report, highlights the need for this, which we're all aware of in Thanet. Thanet holds a number of records which we shouldn't be proud to hold, around the highest number of pedestrian casualties, collisions involving children, serious collisions for all ages, and the highest number of child casualties, all top of the charts in Kent, which is something that really is urgent to tackle. We all agree with that. There's disappointment, I think, that so many hundreds, if not thousands of hours have been spent producing the report. It's a very, very good report. There's been a lot of consultations already. I've attended a couple, one in Canterbury, one here, and there really is important, I think, that the priority of this getting done is raised to the highest level. And one question I'd like to ask is what are the timescales that we can finally get this done, and that we can finally get some money allocated to get actually some of these changes implemented. And one thing I would also like to mention is that I know there are two, in the detail of this report, there are a couple of focus junctions that need to be tackled. And one of those is the Northwood Road, Westwood Road roundabout, which is the site of where the new Thanet Health Hub is going to be situated. And there is already a transport plan being developed for that Thanet Health Hub. I know we had a consultation, another consultation up at the Health Hub about the Health Hub, and I've been speaking to the ladies who are putting together that, working with the consultant to put together that transport plan. Now, I know we're not at the end of this process, but now might be a good opportunity to bring the two things together, because putting together that transport plan and what will come out of that transport plan to enable the Thanet Health Hub to open will bring some money, I'm sure, and will be able to hopefully fund some of these changes. So I wouldn't like to think that because we've got a number of weeks, months, and hopefully not years before we get to the end of this process and we have a finalised document that we can then start looking for funding, we would miss that opportunity of being able to implement some of these changes as part that the Thanet Health Hub transport plan is going to be implementing. But on the whole, brilliant, love the report, just very, very frustrated about the lack of priority at various places, not here, about implementing some of these things, because those record numbers keep going up as things aren't done. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of points really. Yeah, the Thanet CWIP, we'd want to get it adopted as soon as we can after consultation. We would need to speak to KCC about any comments that come back on that consultation, anything we'd need to change. That's not to say we're not doing other things. So there's 3 other projects sort of in the offing for this year. One actually relates to the junction that Councillor Garner mentioned, which is Westwood Road. So one of the other main projects is the St Peter's walking zone. Some members here may remember the presentation that was done by a number of school students from St George's and Charles Dickens, I think that was last year, in looking at ways to make those routes between the schools and in that area much safer, to encourage particularly students to be using those and to make that access in that area better. So one of the pieces of work we're looking at this week is taking that to the next design stage, which is REBA 2. So that work will be going on this year. 2 other pieces of work. One is in relation to working with QEQM to improve cycle routes and to work with their travel planning as well. And the third one relates to some work in Ramsgate to complement the place plan in terms of improving connections and in particular between the town centre of Ramsgate station. So there are a number of things going on. It is a slow process because they are essentially all highway schemes, and so they have to go through the REBA design process. But But this, getting this in place gives us the basis for pushing for further DFT grants. So the grant is from DFT, it's administered by KCC, and then that money is passed out to the districts who are doing different projects. So yes, having this in place will enable us to push forward on some of those projects.
Thank you. Members, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr Jackson, Mr Farrell. As Councillor Garner said, this is a really excellent report, fascinating, all sorts of really useful detail in there, and thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in putting it together. I just wanted to pick up on two things. The first one is one of our big problems in Ramsgate with encouraging people to cycle and walk is car speeds, and we'd noticed on our most recent ward walk, which was only a few weeks ago with KCC Highways colleagues, that they're starting to become more friendly towards the idea of things like a 20-mile-an-hour town centre zone, which when we first suggested it a few years ago, they raised their hands in horror, and we've kept pointing out the success of other 20-mile-an-hour zones elsewhere in Thanet and elsewhere in Kent, and particularly around schools, etc. So we're feeling that there's a bit of a sea change going on there, and that's encouraging us to keep pushing on that. The other thing I wanted to pick up on, which won't be a surprise to Mr Verrill because we've corresponded about it, is the business about Ramsgate Station, and I noticed that in the comments there, specifically in relation to the station, but also in other places, there are concerns from cyclists about safe storage for bikes. And as you know, through the climate change group that I chair at Ramsgate Town Council, we've been talking with South Eastern about how we can get a secure cycling hub at Ramsgate Station, and the answer is there isn't any money, because the money that used to go into those things is now going into these things like the routes. So it does appear that you can have one thing, but you can't have the other one that you need to complement it. And I'm wondering if what we're seeing with the future possible DFT money and whatever, whether there might be possibilities of that kind of infrastructure support as well as the development of routes.
The DFT funding is focused mainly on delivering routes. It tends not to focus so much on sort of supporting infrastructure, if I can put it that way. It was quite interesting that a couple of things that came out of the work we did with the schools and the St Peter's walking zone were talking about seating areas and other things as well as just the route. So it may be that we need to look at to see whether we can work with KCC in terms of using some of that grant aid for those sorts of aspects of the scheme as well as just the route. The route provisions themselves tend to be quite costly. So, there's clearly a balance there in terms of what we can spend the money on.
Councillor.
Thank you. I walk to most things when I'm in Ramsgate. I hate getting in my van, so I'm really supportive of this. And we did have a really useful ward walk with the two officers from KCC. One of the issues with the walking routes is in Ramsgate we have some major roads with no safe crossing points. If you look at Grange Road, there's one crossing point. If you look at the Paragon, there is no safe crossing point. When I emailed KCC to say, look, at the top of Jacob's Ladder we need something, they said, well, you can walk to the London Road roundabout where there's a dropped kerb, or you can go down into the town centre where there's a dropped kerb. But they said it's about 20 metres. I thought, no, it isn't. So the other issue we've got alongside developing walking routes is dropped curbs, particularly for people with disabilities or parents with pushchairs or people that are not wheelchair bound but have got mobility issues. One thing we looked at with the 20 is plenty, because we know it's not safe to get on the road and cycle, and it's not safe to cross some of our roads. We believe that Ramsgate needs a 20 is plenty zone, and one of the suggestions we had some speed monitoring up the high street, which is where we know there's a real issue, particularly when the kids flood down to the grammar school. that speed, the average speed on that road was 24 miles an hour, which means it is ripe for a 20 is plenty. But instead of doing piecemeal bits, we sort of came up with a suggestion that when I sit on planning, we're always told there's a sustainable area around each town, which means we don't have to, that developments don't have to have parking. So I tried looking for this sustainable area around Ramsgate and couldn't find it. So I asked planning if they could send me the map. I'm still waiting for that. But it seems to me that if we've got this sustainable area where we're suggesting at planning there's no need for parking, that a lot of our walking and cycling routes actually need to connect. There needs to be safe walking within those zones, those sustainable zones, because we're encouraging people not to have cars. And also there needs to be sustainable cycling and walking routes maybe between close sustainable areas, for example Ramsgate and Broadstairs. So I just wondered if you've considered some joined up thinking between the local plan and the sustainable areas, and also these connecting routes on foot and cycling. And where is the map?
There's a lot of topics in there. Yeah, so the local plan map does show the areas in the town centres where parking's not required. I can direct you to that separately if you wish. And of course, this piece of work in terms of the local plan will feed into a number of things. We will be looking to see how the sites that have been submitted to us for future allocation sit with these routes. We will be looking to see, and this is happening now, developments which are currently before us at different stages, to what extent they provide they provide new walking and cycling routes that link into the existing network, and we'll also be looking to safeguard these routes in the local plan so that they're not developed for other reasons, and obviously looking at potentially at development contributions towards those as well. So there's a number of things we're doing. Those routes generally, I think, do link those centres, but some of them are, particularly if you look at, for example, a route between Margate and Ramsgate, that's a substantial piece of work to create that. You're needing to look at offline routes and so on, and some of that comes forward through other means. So, yeah, trying to make sure that's all joined up with that. But, as Councillor Garner has said, this is stuff that takes quite a lot of time, unfortunately.
Councillor Pope.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the report. I was really pleased to read about work being done on Victoria traffic lights, and I just wanted to ask if Sarmerston School have been consulted with yet, because we've been trying to organise a safe crossing in front of the school for some time, and the students are very passionate about it, so I'm sure they'd love to speak about it. And I'd also really like to read about the audit that was done for Route 1, and I was interested to read about the door-to-door walks and people physically doing the walks that they're planning, and I was just wondering if people who use wheelchairs and people with pushchairs are also doing these walks as well as people just walking on their feet.
Well, in terms of who we'll consult, we'll consult as widely as we can. We're trying to set up a number of drop-in sessions as well, so we're looking for anyone potentially who will make use of these routes, may have views about whether they're in the right place or whether they're serving the right destinations and so on. In terms of the audits, they were primarily done by Sustrans, and they were done, I think, largely by bike, just to test the waters to see what they were like. I think when we did the walking zone for St Peter's, all the school students were involved in that, so they walked the routes with Sustrans to look at that. So really this is about trying to understand what the barriers are for people, and this is about cycling, walking and wheeling. That's been mentioned as well. And certain of our existing roads and routes are not very friendly from that perspective. So there's an awful lot of work to be done. That there's only this one main funding stream at the moment for this. There may be other work that we can do with KCC in terms of highway improvements, but as far as this piece of work is concerned, this is the only fund we've got at the moment. But all the points are appreciated.
Can I just come in? Just going to say, we can share the audit report, and that it's just too big to go with the report. Appreciate it does say it's on there, but we can put it into a folder and share the folder so you can see it all.
Councillor Pope.
Yeah, thanks. It's just on following on from Councillor Pope's question. You're talking about going in around like the schools. Can I suggest you go into schools? Because it's all good and well setting up drop-ins and expecting people to come to us to give their opinion, but we've got hundreds of children in one place between a certain time. Can I suggest you go into schools and talk to the children and talk to the teachers? Because I think Sampston School would definitely benefit. I know places like North Down and Drapers Mills would definitely benefit. So can I suggest you go into schools? I don't know if you've got the capacity or time to do that.
Most of this work is being done by two officers, myself and Morgan, on relatively small proportions of time. However, we will certainly respond to particular requests. Happy to talk to people. The work that was done for St Peter's was led primarily by Sustrans with some involvement from us, but that included head teachers, students and student body. So we're happy to do that. It'd just be a case of just how much we can do at this stage. This consultation is really about that proposed network and is it about right, but clearly when we get into much more detailed stuff like St Peter's walking zone, you then start to get into much more detailed discussions about particular features in the road, barriers to crossing roads, barriers to cycling. But more than happy to talk to schools and other groups about this piece of work in a bit more detail. Sure.
Scobie.
Yeah, I was interested in how much engagement you've had from KCC on this, because obviously they're mentioned throughout the report, but from just an outside perspective, and Councillor Garner sort of referenced it, there's been a number of sort of issues with KCC involvement. For example, we don't get officers attend the JTB meetings, which is not helpful. And also the specific issue around sort of the Northwood Road roundabout, that potentially could have derailed a significant health investment into Thanet, because years of underinvestment in terms of transport planning by Kent County Council. So this is a long-term issue, but how has the engagement been from Kent County Council on this? Are we expecting to see this before KCC is abolished?
The officers we deal with at KCC are from the active travel unit, so they're obviously very keen to promote this. We obviously have different conversations often with highways officers in relation to development and through the local plan, so that they're not necessarily the same set of officers, but certainly the officers we've engaged with on this piece of work are fully supportive of the things we're doing. They are actively involved in arranging for us to get the grant aid. They know the projects we're trying to push. They know the projects that we've identified as people being interested in, and they're giving us a lot of support with that. So that's what I can say in terms of KCC's involvement with this particular piece of work.
Councillor Bright.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you as well, Adrian, for the report. We really appreciated it when you came and spoke to the Broadstairs Youth Forum as well. That was really useful. I was just wondering whether it would be possible to maybe work more closely with Broadstairs Town Council, because obviously we are trying to manage our highways improvement plan as well. So we're trying to build these good relationships with KCC highways officers. I'm also speaking to schools about their sort of various issues outside their school. So it would be a shame for us to be doubling up when we're sort of setting aside budget on the town council for crossings or different kinds of traffic calming measures that you may be able to get DFT funding for down the line. So it'd be really good to know or to work with you on this as you go forward with it. Thank you.
We're certainly happy to do that, and the work with the schools was very productive, and I think the members who heard the presentation from the students here were impressed with the work, what they had done. We'll obviously be consulting with town and parish councils as well on this, so this is something we're keen to get people's input to, because this network will be what we'll be in a position to bid for going forward, so it's important that we get that network right. So happy to do so.
Anybody else? Just one thing, Adrian. On your report where you've got Focus Junction 1 and Focus Junction 2, obviously Focus Junction 1 is the Northwood Road roundabout. Focus Junction 2 says Northwood Park Road. It should be North Down Park Road. It's got all the little photographs, got Northwood Park Road as well. Just so to avoid the confusion. Okay, so the recommendation is that the panel recommends to Cabinet that this draft infrastructure plan is published for consultation for a period of 6 weeks. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Scobie and a seconder, Councillor Austin, and do we all agree? We all agree. Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Adrian. Moving on to item number 8, the tenancy strategy and tenant management policy. Ashley again.
Thank you. The tenancy strategy and the tenant management policy require regular updates to remain compliant with national legislation and to reflect local housing needs. The revised document incorporates recent legislative changes, including the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023 and AWAB's law, whilst also updating social and housing data relevant to the district. The tenant management policy is required by all social landlords and should regard the contents of the tenancy strategy. The policy outlines what tenancy flexibility can be offered, how tenancies are managed and how tenancies are ended, and criteria for tenancy succession. The Overview and Scrutiny Panel is asked to review the proposals and recommendations to be forwarded to Cabinet as follows. To approve the draft tenancy strategy and tenancy management policy for consultation. To authorise officers to undertake a consultation process with key stakeholders, including tenants, tenant representative groups and registered providers, and delegate authority to the Director of Place to make any necessary minor amendments following consultation before final adoption by Cabinet.
Thank you. Members, do we all agree to those recommendations? Any comments to make? No? Okay, can I have a... Whoa. Councillor Davis.
Just one question, actually, and I have mentioned this before, but it's to do with the AWAB's law side of it. Are we looking into positive air pressurised systems, because they've proven really successful in doing away with mould, and a lot of the problem with mould, as I understand it, is habits of tenants in particular, drying clothes and things. Positive air pressurisation prevents that mould build up and things, and has proven really helpful in that sector. So hopefully we're looking at that as we move towards this, because it's quite serious, and I mean a lot of housing stock, obviously, especially the older stuff, has got massive mould problems with the attendant health issues. Probably for less than £200 per unit we can mitigate this, which apart from the mitigation side in terms of responsibility has massive impact in terms of outcomes.
Noted that.
The service that's really responsible for this is Tenant Leaseholder Services, which obviously is led by Sally, and she's not here this evening. But I do know that she was had previously said that we were happy to look at any technology that would help. If it's cost effective and it works, and we've assessed a dwelling for damp and condensation and mould that needs some remedial action, we'd be happy to look at any technology and trial it. So I don't know off the top of my head whether we've used the system you're talking about in any dwellings, but I'm more than happy to ask that question for you.
No, thanks, and as I say, happy to have an ongoing dialogue on it, because as I say, I do know it's effective, and I don't want to sound callous here, it's extremely cost effective, but also has a really good outcome in terms of health issues. So.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Anybody else? Okay, so the recommendations are as Ashley laid out. So do I have a proposer? Councillor Austin, and a second to Councillor Packman, and do we all agree? We agree. Okay, moving on to item number 9, the Warm Homes Local Grant, proposal to distribute the grant award. And Ashley again.
Thank you. Warm Homes Local Grant is a government-funded scheme with the ambition of upgrading 5 million homes over the next 3 to 5 years to cut bills for families and deliver warmer homes to reduce fuel poverty. It will also help with reducing carbon emissions in support of the net zero target by 2050. Following a rigorous bidding process, Thanet District Council has been awarded 1.5 million in the grant. Warm Homes Local Grant is fully funded scheme for eligible owner-occupiers. Landlords will get one property fully funded and all other properties will require a 50% landlord contribution. Cost caps are £15,000 per home for energy performance updates such as insulation and £15,000 per home for low carbon heating such as air source heat pumps. So a possible £30,000 grant is achievable per home and these figures can be averaged out over the funding period. Thanet District Council is a member of a framework that could enable it to call off an established installer via a direct award subject to council compliance with framework conditions. The Overview and Scrutiny Panel is being asked to note the following decisions being sought from Cabinet and to make any recommendations in relation to these matters that it considers appropriate. The recommendations are that Cabinet agrees officers accept and distribute the 1.5 million funding allocated in accordance with the eligibility criteria set out in the report, and that delegated authority is given to the Head of Housing and Planning to agree with procurement and legal colleagues a direct award to appoint an installer by calling them off a framework that the Council is already a member of. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Members. Councillor Packman.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for this, and well done for being awarded the money. When you say other landlords, is that private landlords, housing associations, any kind of landlord will have to stump up 50%? So you're looking at 15 grand from a landlord if the tenant is successful in applying to you? Or do they have to go through their landlord?
Landlords can have one property fully funded and then 50% on a second property.
Okay.
So they could have one property fully funded.
Okay, but they'd have to stump up around 15k.
No, that's only for the second property.
The second property.
Yeah, so for the first one, everyone can have one, and then for the second one, it's 50%.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
No, because they can have up to 30. There's two different parts.
The question is, are you then going to work with the landlord liaison team to get this message out to landlords? Because otherwise landlords won't be aware of this.
Yeah, we will do. We will be doing communications. We have already got a waiting list for this because we've known it's been coming a long time. So we have got a lot of households already interested. I think we've got over 70 already.
Councillor Davis.
I think one thing that's really welcome in this is that this is not for off-gas only. Which I thought was a little bit prejudicial on previous incarnations of the scheme. Given the fact that we're supposed to be moving away from that, then the fact that this allows people to upgrade when they've got a gas supply, I think, is to be welcomed. So, just, it's a better scheme than it was before.
Councillor Austin?
I also think it's a better scheme than it was before because both owner-occupiers and landlords can apply, which is going to help us hopefully address some of the properties with the worst EPC ratings. So just want to say congratulations on getting the money, and really proud of the work that our home energy people are doing, and the very proactive way that they're working with us as councillors to use us as their ambassadors to get that information out and to feedback comments from residents. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? So you said you had a waiting list. So does that mean the 1.5 million has gone already? Yeah. Okay. No point anybody else applying then. Okay, so Ashley has laid out the recommendations there to Cabinet. And do we all agree? Or do we have a proposer first? Sorry, proposer. Councillor Austin, a seconder. Councillor Scobie, and we all agree. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 10, the Youth Services Provision Scrutiny Review Report. Councillor Bright, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased to introduce this Youth Review Report on behalf of the Working Party. I want to thank my fellow councillors, senior officers, youth workers and all the young people who contributed so thoughtfully to this process. I'm also grateful to DEM Services for their support in compiling this report. This scrutiny group was established because we recognised an urgent need to examine how Thanet District Council delivers for our young people and to recommend meaningful improvements that will help them thrive. While Kent County Council holds the statutory responsibility for youth services, our focus has been on how TDC can better engage with young residents and address the issues that matter most to them. Although we had limited time and resources, through surveys, desktop research and honest conversations, we gained a clear picture of the challenges our young people face. Thanet has the highest number of young people not in education, employment or training in Kent, and our youth unemployment rate is the highest in the South East. When we invest in youth services, we improve life chances, reduce crime and strengthen our communities. Yet in recent years, youth and children's services in Thanet have suffered from austerity and county-level funding cuts. But this report is about how TDC can take meaningful steps towards plugging the gaps and creating new pathways for our young people to become healthier, happier and more engaged citizens. We conducted this review at a time when young people are facing unprecedented pressures, the cost of living crisis, the lingering effects of the pandemic and the relentless demands of social media. More than ever, they need our support, our guidance and our belief in their potential. We listened directly to young people about their experiences growing up in Thanet. They told us they want to feel safe, to have fun and to access free, inclusive activities outside of school. They're deeply concerned about crime, the cost of living and the environment. Above all, they want more opportunities to secure a better future for themselves. The recommendations in this report reflects the insights and aspirations of young people, counsellors, youth workers and heads of services. I'm pleased to report that following our meeting with the Cabinet Management Team, every recommendation is supported in principle. The only constraints to immediate action are budgetary ones. Among our key proposals is the creation of a youth liaison officer, a vital role to lead on building relationships with schools and youth leaders, coordinating engagement and delivering improved educational resources, particularly around antisocial behaviour and tackling violence against women and girls. This officer would also enable young people to contribute to planning and design decisions and expand work experience and internship opportunities. I sincerely hope that funds can be allocated to this much-needed resource in the 2026-27 budget. We also recommend a means-tested voucher scheme to enable disadvantaged young people to access sports and leisure opportunities. Additional civil enforcement patrols to improve safety in our parks and open spaces. And training for counsellors to better equip us all to engage meaningfully with young residents. By acting on these recommendations, we can ensure that Thanet's young people are not just heard, but truly supported and empowered to thrive. And I look forward to hearing your views and comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bright. Sterling work again from a scrutiny panel. It's good to see a small group of councillors coming together and doing a great piece of work. I mean, I've been a part of a couple of scrutiny reviews and I'm always impressed by the work we come up with. Members, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bright. I think this is an excellent piece of work. Really, really impressed with it. The practicality of the suggestions, the common sense that comes through from, and the young people's voices that are clearly being heard. It's really helpful. Obviously, because I'm always banging on about how councillors' skills should be used more and councillors should be trained more, etc. I'm particularly interested in those recommendations, but I also think the suggestion of the youth liaison officer and the cabinet advisory group, so that it becomes a central focus of the work of this council to look at the future and to look at how we're supporting our young people to meet that future. I think it's a superb report, and well done everybody who's been involved, particularly to Councillor Bright.
Yeah, absolutely. I did have a request to speak under 20.1, which is Councillor Manners, so I should have brought him first. Sorry. No, that's my fault. Councillor Manners, it's up to you.
Oh yeah, that's got it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bright, for the report. It's really good to see this work. I mean, I think as a councillor, around my ward, and I'm sure other councillors have the same issues. There's a whole wealth of problems with antisocial behaviour from young people who just feel completely disconnected from the political process, who don't feel part of society, and there's a kind of a sense of nihilism, and anything that can overcome that has got to be applauded and welcomed. I was interested there's the role of councillors in reaching out to some of these community groups and schools. I think there is a whole depth and breadth of experience with, 50 odd councillors, and that's one hell of a resource that could be tapped into, which wouldn't cost any money, because after all, if we can spend a month walking the streets, putting leaflets through doors, we can give up a few evenings to go and talk to, and encourage younger people to feel engaged in the process, to feel that it's their council and that it's that they're actually stakeholders. I get a lot of feedback from younger people who just sort of like, somebody should do something, but it's nothing to do with me. And I think if we can let young people know that they can make positive change, that they can take control of things, and the councillors would be an excellent resource to do that. So I don't know whether we can make an amendment, a suggestion here, to ask, could we have some training for councillors, and perhaps have a core of councillors who would have a set curriculum where they could go and talk to youth groups, schools, and so on, to engage with them. Particularly among the more experienced councillors, I think that the resource is there, and it's readily available, and it's free. So that's the first thing. On the subject of the recruitment of a liaison officer, obviously I'm always mindful of spending more money on a problem and looking perhaps at what we could do to solve some of these problems with existing resource. And one of the things that came out of the Grant Review Committee was the fact that that there is occasionally a silo mentality with individual departments within the council, and I think we have a lot of youth groups that are in TDC properties. I'm thinking of the First Garland Scouts as one case I came across, and on their lease renewal, we could be doing a great deal more of hand-holding to support lay people who are volunteers who are giving up their time to deliver these youth services. And I think that we ought to look at what the council can do to support those people to be able to more effectively deliver services, so that they're not tied up looking for electrical safety certificates, EPCs, and the minutiae of their leases. That if there is a liaison role, that role actually includes assistance to those people to navigate these navigate these sort of structures within the council. So that's the other issue there. That if there's going to be a job description for a liaison officer, if there is one to be recruited, that they actually liaise between departments within TDC to support, not just directly support and go in and talk to young people, but to support the people who are actually delivering services for young people. Again, if there is more resource to be allocated, why not allocate it to subsidising some of additional subsidies for the rents on TDC assets that are being used by community youth groups? We had a presentation from Andrea Plant in the property team, and it seems that there is a finite budget for subsidy for community groups that are renting TDC assets. Let's look at increasing that perhaps to support youth provision. And the final point was on internships and work experience. I was really pleased that TDC's offering additional licenses along the coast, although at very short notice for the 2025 summer season. But if we're looking at a forward to 2026, perhaps there are opportunities to engage with young people on some TDC beach concessions and look at partners in the private sector perhaps, so that young people can actually profit from the tourist industry in Thanet and encourage enterprise. It's an opportunity. TDC has these licenses up for grabs. Why not partner with private companies who are able to support and encourage enterprise initiatives with these younger people. So those are the points, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Manus. I'll just, John, do you want to come back? I don't know if you've got any scope. I mean, you know, the interests of your recommendations more than I do. I don't know if you can fit anything into those.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Thank you for your suggestions as well, Councillor Manners. I would say that the recommendations B and C recommend that we do enlist counsellors with skills in youth work already, and also, which is thoroughly supported by the senior management team, because there are no financial implications involved with that. But also training as well is part of that as well. So training counsellors so they do feel more confident going to speak with youth groups. That may also involve DBS checking as well, which was part of the recommendation as well. But yeah, I think subsidies to support youth groups that are using TDC properties that's a good idea. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Cupp.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. It was just to say that I really enjoyed my time being part of the subcommittee on this, but also majoritarily, I just want to say a massive well done to Councillor Bright. She worked incredibly hard on this and honestly went the extra mile to get the results that are in this, and it's a really well put together report, and wouldn't have been possible without the lead of Councillor Bright. Thank you.
Councillor Wing.
Yeah, I'd like to echo all the words that are said. Obviously, teacher of 26 years, mentoring young people through Charlton. So I've got a passion about young people, and they are our most valuable asset. So it was really great, and it's amazing what you can achieve when we all put aside our political parties and work together as a group. And Joanne Councillor Bright led the group really well. So it's been an absolute pleasure to sit on that CAG, as it was to sit on the Equalities CAG. So many positive recommendations have come out, and it really is great. You know, we hear so much bad press about some of our young people, and it's a minority. So it's great. It's great that during this piece of work, young people actually had a voice, and it's not unsurprising that they have exactly the same concerns as us adults. They want a safe, clean place to live in and be safe in. So yeah, it's been a great piece of work, and I'm hoping we can take this forward. And maybe there's some scope going forward that we set up these cross-party working groups that go forward to lead on projects going forward, rather than sometimes a political divide, which doesn't help us sometimes.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, and I think I echo a lot of the points, and I think it's a really good report. And again, it's another area that, as a councillor of multiple years, I've not really thought a huge amount. So reading the report, it sort of enlightens you about the various sort of things the council does. I had a question, it's probably maybe for Mr Blundell or Democratic Services, but there's a number of the recommendations says, oh, this is a budgetary issue, so this will go into a process. What does that mean in practice? Are these going to be put on the desk of a cabinet member when they go through the chamber process? Does it come separately? What does that mean? Or because my worry would be that that's just, yeah, this will go into the budget process and then disappears into the million other things that are part of that.
Pretty much as you described, it will go into the STAR chamber process and be assessed alongside the other competing priorities that we've got for next year's setting next year's budget.
Could we get feedback on that separately? Because I mean, obviously there's specific asks there, and I think we would obviously accept that. You know, a lot of these things are asking for an additional officer.
Sure.
Is going to be very tricky with the sort of the financial situation, but it would be good to sort of have a closeout on that. And the fact that it's called out specifically in a number of those recommendations, saying, "Oh, this needs to be covered in the budget," it'd be quite helpful to have the comeback on that.
Happy to either address it specifically as part of the main budget process or as a separate report back to this committee, whatever the committee prefers.
And Chair, if I may, sorry, I had an additional point. And it was more of a broader suggestion. I think since I've been on the committee, we've had the tourism working party, we had external grants, and we had the youth provision working party. I think it might be helpful in the recommendations for us to do two things. Number one is to split the financial and the non-financial together, because I think anything that involves budget immediately, as we just heard, gets taken out of our hands, and they should almost become sort of, as we get a monitoring report and it's down to the Cabinet to set policy and decide what happens with that. Any that don't cost money and are around changing it, they're accepted by officers, I think should be looked at differently. And I think in future, we as a committee, we as a panel should actually focus more on the non-financial ones. I think it's where we can make more of an impact. And then linked to that, it might be helpful to also separate that into quick wins and more long-term, because you could easily have a set of recommendations that everybody's agreeing to that are quick wins and have no budget costs. But if they're drowned in a list of, I can't remember how many were in the tourism one, but I think we had a lot of recommendations. I think in my work life, if I'm presenting to a senior leadership of a business, a number of recommendations around their resilience or their business continuity or something like that, you try and make it as easy as possible to present this stuff, because I can't even imagine how many things the officers are juggling and the Cabinet members and stuff like that. If we can present them as a panel, a list of, these are the top 5 quick wins that don't have a budget impact, and these are the more long-term things, I think we will have more impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the guidance with scrutiny reviews is always to make sure there isn't any budgetary impacts, because obviously we've got to do things that are possible. So, obviously, I'm sure Joanne will be pushing for budgets for her recommendations, especially with her connections to Cabinet. I'm sure she will be pushing that well and truly along.
I wanted to support what Councillor Scobie said there, and to point out that, for example, with the Voluntary Sector and External Grants Committee that I chaired, we did actually say, if officer time cannot be devoted to this, we as members will do it. And I think there are things, particularly with this, looking at the sort of engagement of councillors that may be in these recommendations, that we can have a fallback position that says there are things we could do if officer time can't, at least currently, be devoted to it. And I think that's worth us considering when we're looking at those quick wins.
Yeah, I'm sure with a DBS and a bit of safeguarding training, we could all get involved, and I'm sure a lot of us would. Councillor Scobie?
If I could just follow that, and for me, like, it's almost not specific about any of the working groups, but we should focus as a panel on why aren't more of those recommendations being picked up, because we've had 3 sets now that have been warm words, and I think there's a lot of support, but it might be incumbent on us, maybe, I can't remember what you said the next one, the next one's going to be around poverty, of almost like trying to limit ourselves to a specific set of recommendations without a budget impact that might be quick wins, and then build out from that, because we could be following up on topics once we get some success, but I feel we've had 3 hits at it that have been all warmly received, and they've gone to Cabinet for monitoring, and I get the sense from everyone sat around, everyone's nodding their head, but we're dealing with very busy people juggling lots of different things, and I think there's more that we could do as a panel to make that easier and make sure our recommendations are coming across in a better way.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoke about reviewing the reviews, to see where we are with the recommendations, and I think we talk about doing it, but I think, like I say, we're all busy people as well, and we just never get around to it. But I know the stuff we can do. We can set up a little working group, another working group, but I mean that's going to be officer time and that. But I mean that'll be something down the line. But Nick's saying no.
That will allow us to just look back.
Absolutely, yes.
Great.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I think, as I say, it's been 18 months, getting on for 2 years since the very first one. So, as you say, that is part of the whole 360 process, that we will be coming back with the first of the reviews, which was Coastal Waste, yeah, and reviewing and seeing whether or not those have been accepted, or whether or not other work has contributed to achieving those goals. But absolutely, yep. We will be, and I think that's something we want to insert into the work programme, both for the coastal waste one and the
all of them.
All of them.
All
yeah.
of them.
Yeah.
Any other comments? So are we all happy to send Joanne's review off to Cabinet for? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well done, everybody. Okay, moving on to item number 11, forward plan and exempt cabinet reports list. Unless there's something from that plan that the panel wish to consider, the members are asked to note that report.